Mafia: The Old Country is a game that is the definition of unrealized potential. Everything about this game is on the cusp of being great, but in every single way, the game falls short just by a little. Now, don't get me wrong, that does not mean the game is bad at all. And I know the clickbaity title might imply that I didn't like the game, but let me tell you right now, I did. A lot. But I just wish certain aspects of the game were expanded upon within a way that kept the integrity of what made Mafia: The Old Country great, but adding to and fleshing out certain systems, features, and story elements. So today, let's talk about what this game does right, what could be improved, and why I wanted more from Mafia: The Old Country. First, I want to talk about this game's world. So, in case you don't know, Mafia: The Old Country is set in 1900 Sicily, and I think the world itself is realized incredibly well. To start, this game's graphics aren't jaw-dropping incredible, but they are still damn good. And so, driving through the rolling hills of Sicily, seeing the small little towns, and the beautiful Mediterranean Sea still really immersed me within the setting of this game. Now, while looking at the gameplay might suggest that this game's world is an open one, it really kinda isn't. This game is linear, with linear story progression and linear gameplay just set in the backdrop of an open Sicilian region. What this means is that there's nothing in this world outside of the main story, and the only interaction you get with this world is just driving from main mission to main mission. And look, I understand why Hangar 13, the developers of Mafia: The Old Country, did this. I mean, Sicily is a gorgeous location, and it makes sense that the developers wanted to showcase this beautiful world and allow players to see the context of where each mission took place and how it affects the locations around the map. But to me, this is kinda the worst of both worlds. For one, while the main missions are for the most part great, I'll get into that later, there's only a limited number of locations you can theoretically do these missions at. The world itself is a fixed open world. You aren't loading into new sandboxes every time you play a new mission, so this limits the different scenarios, encounters, and cool and unique locations that the story beats can be set in. But that's not the only gripe I have with this system, and it's not even the major one. My major gripe with this design is that it completely defeats the purpose of what makes everything about an open world so great. Open worlds are notorious for immersing the player into the location that the game is set in. Whether that's doing some interesting side activities or driving around the map on their own free will to see the various sites, get into some random trouble with the law, or just experience every nook and cranny of this gorgeous world that the developers handcrafted. None of those benefits are here with this system. You're stuck with a linear story, which, do not get me wrong, I do not mind at all, but you have this beautiful backdrop of an open world begging to be fleshed out. There's an exploration mode in the main menu, but it's extremely limited. All you can do is drive around, hunt for collectibles, and purchase upgrades from the shop. That's it. You can't shoot at NPCs, get the law involved, blow up cars, or basically do anything fun that you'd want to experience in a game set in gorgeous Sicily where you play as a mafioso. And so look, yes, I enjoyed this world. It was fun to drive around during the main missions and hear the little bits and pieces of the lore that surrounded this region during that time period. But all that made me want to do was to go out and explore the world even more. But I couldn't. All I could do was listen to the game when it told me to go here and do that thing with no way to carve out my own path. Kinda like when a Mafia Don orders his henchmen around. Speaking of Mafia Dons, let's talk about Mafia: The Old Country's story. Basically, you play as Enzo, a lowly mine boy who was sold as a child to the grueling labor that is working in the sulfur mines. You and your buddy somehow managed to save enough money to buy out your debt with the mafia family that runs the mines, the Spadaros. But horrible working conditions caused one of the mines to collapse while you were in it, killing your friend. In a rage, you attacked one of the main Spadaros who was in charge of the mines and fled. You soon found yourself on a rival family's turf, the Tereses, and they promised to take care of you and give you a job with better conditions, and so the story essentially starts there. I don't want to go into too much because I don't want to get into any spoilers, but you essentially see Enzo go from a lowly mine boy to a made man with everything he could ever want right in front of him for the taking. To me, this is by far the most frustratingly unrealized potential in a game story that I've seen in a long time. I love everything about the way this story is set up. I love the main character Enzo and his progression and arc throughout the game. The side characters like Cesare, Luca, and the love interest Isabella are all exceptionally well realized, have good depth, and great motivations for who they are and what they want to become. Don Teresi is also one of the coolest and most menacing characters I've seen in a video game in a long time. His voice acting is simply phenomenal, and within every cutscene with him in it, he commands attention. The story beats that we play are also incredibly fun, varied, and interesting to experience. So if I love the setup, and to some respects the payoff of this narrative so much, you might ask, why is there a frustrating amount of unrealized potential? And that's simply because the game's story is frankly way too short. Mafia, the Old Country, took me about 12 hours to complete from start to finish. And don't get me wrong, that isn't a bad length for a lot of games. But for this one in particular, it's way too short. I'm not saying that this game needed to be an 80-hour behemoth of a game, but I do think the 20-hour mark would have been perfect. Everything about the way this story is set up, the characters and their arcs, and everything in between lends itself to a longer narrative. And you can see that within the various missions, or chapters as this game calls it. The first 5 or so chapters are basically straight tutorial, teaching you about the world, how the game's mechanics work, and what is expected of Enzo moving forward. After those 5 chapters, there's honestly a good amount of meaningless missions thrown in between as well. You'll have a horse race, and then a cutscene will play signifying there's been a year time skip, and then another random mission will play out, and then there'll be a significant time skip again, and the cycle just keeps repeating itself. Without spoiling too much, the main conflict doesn't begin until chapter 9, and it ends in chapter 12. There are 14 chapters in the game. For the main conflict to begin well over halfway in the story, and for it to be so short just screams of cut content by the developers. So the characters' arcs themselves also just can't be fully realized within this short of a story. Enzo, Cesare, and Luca's friendship can go from just starting out to a chapter later with a year time skip to a very strong bond. And you, the player, see none of that development within those three's bond. To me, this is where the linear time skip narrative also doesn't play well with the open world aspect. If the world was fully persistent and open, with various side quests and activities to do throughout the world, the time skips wouldn't be as jarring because you'd spend actual in-game time doing things as a mafioso, and the friendships between Luca, Cesare, and Enzo could have been expanded upon with side quests. This goes for Isabella and Enzo's relationship as well. You see bits and pieces, but you can never coherently piece it together because there just isn't enough time to do so. All this to say, I wanted more time in this world. Not only would this help with the story, this would also help with immersion. You see Enzo go from rags to riches in just about 12 hours of real time, but over 4 years of in-game time. That just isn't enough time to see a big time skip like that. None of these tasks that could propel a young mafioso like Enzo into a made man are explored. And so it just comes across as jarring when an hour ago he was still a vineyard worker, and now an hour later he's somehow a top man for Don Teresi. Just adding 8 or so hours, a couple of fleshed out, optional but in-depth side quests, and some various side activities like collections or contract assassinations could really have helped build out these characters more and provide a more plausible amount of time before a year time skip. Like I said in the beginning, this is the most important aspect of the game that I felt as though didn't realize its potential. The story was there, the setup was there, and the characters were there. Just the attention to detail was missing. The last aspect of this game that I want to talk about is the gameplay. And to me, this is the most average part of the game, and the aspect that I think could have been improved the most. The main problem regarding the gameplay, like the narrative, is that there just isn't simply enough time for some of the gameplay systems and features to matter. There's a clear contrast between the gameplay being built for a game with the length of 12 hours and the progression, which is clearly built for a game that's much longer. Mafia the Old Country is a third-person GTA-style cover shooter, and it does that part decently well. The shooting is nice and weighty, Enzo's movements are pretty solid, the stealth is fun, but easy and forgiving, and the enemy AI is honestly pretty good and aggressive. However, the gameplay is pretty shallow outside of those things that I just mentioned. There isn't a whole lot to do. This makes it perfect for a 12-hour story-driven game where the gameplay is pretty secondary to the story being told. But even then, I felt as though I was getting a bit bored by the end of the game. Every mission entailed some stealth to infiltrate a place, and then things eventually going bad, causing a massive shootout, and then a boss melee fight at the end. It worked for the first 8 to 10 hours, but became tedious after that. However, the progression within this game is built for a completely different game. You can upgrade like 3 different types of guns, getting better stats every time. You also have 3 different types of knives that do their own things, each with a tier list within them providing better stats. You also have cars, horses, and clothing you can all buy with in-game currency, as well as charms and beads for a necklace that provides you with passive buffs. There's simply no way you can buy everything you want and build yourself into this badass that the game expects you to believe Enzo is within the time limit of this game. And because of this, all those upgrades, charms, weapons, cars, horses become kind of meaningless. You can get through the game just fine with your starting weapons, knives, and the story's clothing. This isn't an RPG where you can be under-leveled if you go too deep into a story without upgrading your character first. So then why are there so many progression options for a game that barely gives you enough time to utilize them? On top of all this, the shop that you buy all these things from is like straight up only available like 3 times within the story. It's a certain location on the map, and only when the game has you drive through that road can you go to the shop and upgrade your character. So then why the hell is it in the game? It just doesn't make any sense to me. You can't build out Enzo in different ways and maybe make him more stealthy one playthrough and a run and gun brute in another. So then why are there progression options for you to attempt to do those things? To me, again, this is a classic case of cut content. It felt as though the developers had in their mind that they wanted to make this a longer game, where some of these progression systems actually meant something, but for one reason or another, they had to cut back, and so a lot of these systems just became meaningless. Look, overall, there's still a lot to like about Mafia the Old Country. Without a doubt, this game still has a gorgeous and detailed world, a pretty solid story, and pretty serviceable gameplay. To me, it's just a matter of fundamental design choices that I do not agree with. To me, this game should have had a fully open world with side quests and activities. This game also should have had a longer story to fully realize some of the themes, characters, and plot lines. And the game should have also had deeper gameplay mechanics that worked in conjunction with its pretty deep progression systems. But the developers did not see it that way. And look, for Mafia 1 and 2 fans, that's probably fine. This game is a direct successor to Mafia 1 and 2's gameplay direction and style, and for many, that's the correct way a Mafia game should be structured. But those games came out over 15 years ago. To me, certain modern innovations could have been made to this game's formula, while keeping that tone and vibe that made those older Mafia games beloved. And look, this game was priced as though it was a smaller experience at only $50, well below what many today consider AAA pricing. And for $50, I think this game is worth giving a chance. All of my critiques for this game come from a place of love for this game and wanting to see more of this beautiful Sicily and touching story that Hangar 13 put together. Here's hoping that the next Mafia can fully realize the potential I know this series has and put Mafia back on the map as a franchise here to stay. Either way, that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below your thoughts on Mafia the Old Country. I've seen quite a bit of mixed reviews. I've seen a lot of people praising the game, and it's generally getting good reviews and a pretty great consensus overall. But I have seen people with similar critiques and problems to the ones that I have. that they liked everything that they saw. They just wanted more of it and thought that Hangar 13 could put into some more innovations and things like that. But yeah, guys, let me know down below. If you like this type of content, make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to see more content like this. I've got a lot more videos planned coming up. I've got a Horizon Zero Dawn deep dive, and as well as other games that need to be reviewed that are coming out shortly. So yeah, guys, make sure to subscribe and keep up with those. But yeah, guys, it's CGG. I'm out.